Elijah Carter wasn't just another teenager. While kids his age spent their afternoons lost in video games or chasing the latest trends, he was buried in books, equations swirling in his mind like constellations in the night sky. His world revolved around numbers, logic, and problem-solving. Things that made sense, things that were predictable. Growing up in Cincinnati's working-class district of Price Hill, he had learned early on that the world wasn't always fair. His mother, Vanessa, was a nurse, working exhausting shifts that left her feet swollen and her eyes heavy with exhaustion. His father, Marcus, was a truck driver who spent weeks on the road, hauling freight from state to state, sacrificing time with his family to put food on the table. Elijah was left alone a lot, but he didn't mind. His love for learning kept him occupied. He was 17, but his mind operated on a level that most adults couldn't comprehend. Professors invited him to sit in on lectures. Universities fought over him like chess pieces in a high-stakes game, each offering him full-ride scholarships. MIT, Stanford, Georgia Tech. He had his pick of the best, but he wasn't looking for easy. He was looking for greatness. Despite his genius, Elijah never let it get to his head. He was humble, grounded. 3 nights a week, he volunteered as a tutor at the Price Hill Public Library, helping college students grasp concepts that had once eluded them. For him, intelligence wasn't about bragging rights. It was about what you could do with it. That night had been no different. He had just finished a tutoring session with Darius, a struggling engineering student on the verge of quitting. 2 hours later, Darius left with newfound determination, eyes burning with purpose. Elijah packed up his books, satisfied. These moments made him proud, not just of his intellect, but of what he could get with it. But as he stepped onto the dimly lit sidewalk, his world was about to shift in a way he never could have predicted. The street was quiet, the occasional hum of a car in the distance blending with the rustling of leaves and the night breeze. Elijah adjusted his backpack, his mind already thinking about the complex physics problem he wanted to tackle when he got home. Then he heard it. Screeching tires. His head snapped up just as red and blue lights bathed the sidewalk in an ominous glow. A police cruiser pulled up beside him. Fast. Too fast. Instinctively, Elijah kept walking, hands in his pockets. Posture relaxed. He had done nothing wrong. Then came the voice, sharp, commanding. "Hey, you in the hoodie. Stop right there." Elijah turned, blinking against the bright headlights. A white officer stepped out of the car, his stance dripping with authority. His badge gleamed under the streetlights. Officer Greg Mathers. Elijah's mind kicked into high gear, running through possibilities. This wasn't the first time he'd been stopped by police. It happened all the time in his neighborhood. Young, black, hoodie, backpack. That was enough, but this time felt different. "Is something wrong, officer?" Elijah asked, keeping his voice even, respectful. Mathers didn't answer immediately. He was studying Elijah like a predator, sizing a prey. "Where are you coming from?" "The library. I tutor there." "At this hour?" Mathers tilted his head, skeptical. "It's only 9:30. Elijah held back a sigh. It wasn't late, but he knew better than to argue. You matched the description of a suspect in a robbery earlier tonight. There was the trap. Elijah had seen it before. Vague descriptions, baseless accusations, easy arrests. He had witnessed it happen to his friends, his neighbors. His pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I don't know anything about a robbery," he said. "You can check my ID. I was at the library. There are security cameras." He moved slowly, reaching for his pocket. "Don't move." Mathers' voice exploded through the night, sharp as a blade. Elijah froze, hands in the air. Don't give them a reason. He knew the rules. The younger cop, one Elijah hadn't noticed before, shifted uncomfortably, his lips pressed into a thin line. But he said nothing. Mathers reached for his radio. "I got him. Male, black, gray hoodie, backpack." Bringing him in. Elijah's stomach dropped. "Bringing me in for what?" His voice was steady, but the frustration crept in. "I just told you where I was. You can check the library security footage." Mathers didn't acknowledge a single word. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Elijah instinctively stepped back, his mind racing, trying to comprehend what was unfolding. "Sir, I didn't do anything," he protested, his voice thick with disbelief. Mathers didn't care. The cuffs snapped around his wrists. Cold, unforgiving. And just like that, his freedom was gone. The ride to Hamilton County Justice Center was eerily silent. Elijah sat in the back seat, his wrists aching from the tight metal cuffs. His thoughts raced faster than his emotions could catch up. This didn't make sense if he was truly a suspect. Why hadn't they questioned him? Why hadn't they checked his alibi? Unless they weren't looking for the truth. The reality hit him like a sledgehammer. They didn't care if he was innocent. They just wanted an easy arrest by the time they reached the station. His plan was already forming. Mathers yanked him from the vehicle with firm grip, guiding him through the precinct doors. The sterile scent of bleach and sweat filled the air. A desk sergeant barely glanced up as he typed away at his computer. "Charges?" the sergeant asked lazily. "Resisting. Possible connection to a robbery." Mathers said, without emotion, like he had done this 100 times before. Elijah's jaw clenched. Then Mathers did something that changed everything. He smirked. He was enjoying this. Elijah stared at him, and for the first time, he knew exactly what he had to do. Mathers thought this was over. IT had just begun to die in a small holding cell. Elijah sat, rolling his wrists to get the blood flowing again. "You get one call," Mathers said, the amusement still lingering in his tone. "Make it count." Elijah dialed with steady hands. His mother answered on the second ring, exhaustion thick in her voice. "Mom," he said, voice low but firm, "I need you to listen carefully. I've been arrested." Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "I swear I didn't do anything," he continued. "Call Mr. Langston. Tell him I need him here first thing in the morning." Langston wasn't just a lawyer. He was a titan, a family friend. A legend in the courtroom, and a man who had spent decades dismantling cases just like this one. Elijah wasn't going down without a fight. And when morning came, Mathers would regret ever putting those cuffs on him. Morning arrived, and with it, the weight of reality pressed harder against Elijah's chest. The courtroom was cold, the air thick with judgment. Elijah shuffled inside, shackled, his wrists raw from the cuffs. The orange jumpsuit clung to his body, a symbol of guilt before he even had a chance to prove his innocence. But he wasn't afraid. He wasn't panicked. He was calculating. His mother sat in the front row, exhaustion and worry carved into her face. But next to her, standing tall and composed in an iron-gray suit, was Langston, and Langston was smiling. Not in amusement, not in arrogance, in certainty.
Mathers was there, too, sitting at the prosecution's table, relaxed, smug, flipping through his notes like this was routine to him. It was. But for the first time in his career, his routine was about to be shattered. The prosecutor stood, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the defendant was arrested on suspicion of robbery and resisting arrest." He matched the description given by a witness at the scene. Langston leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He let the words settle before finally speaking. "And what exactly was this description?" His voice was light, almost casual, but there was a dangerous sharpness to it. The prosecutor hesitated, glancing at his notes before reading. The suspect is described as a black male, late teens, wearing a hoodie and carrying a backpack. Langston smiled, a small, knowing smile. "So if I understand correctly, this description could apply to half the black teenagers in Cincinnati?" The courtroom stilled. The prosecutor shifted, uncomfortable. Elijah could see it. The first crack in their case, Langston wasn't just fighting this, he was dismantling it. And he was just getting started. Mathers took the stand, his posture rigid, voice steady. "I stopped the suspect because he matched the description, and when I approached, he made a sudden movement, reaching for his waistband. That's when I believed he might be armed." Langston stood slowly, taking his time, his gaze never leaving Mathers. "Your Honor," he said, his voice deliberate, "I respectfully request permission to submit new evidence into record." The judge adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." Langston turned toward the screen in the courtroom. The video began to play. IT wasn't security footage in the crime scene. IT wasn't fabricated police footage. IT was Price Hill Library security footage. IT showed Elijah sitting at a desk, tutoring a student. The exact time the robbery occurred, a murmur rippled to the courtroom. Langston let it sink in before turning back to Mathers. "Officer Mathers," he said, voice dangerously smooth, Can you explain to court how my client committed a robbery miles away while he was inside a library tutoring students? Mathers' jaw tightened. The courtroom had shifted. The power dynamic had flipped in Elijah. He wasn't the one on trial anymore. Langston wasn't done. You claim my client resisted arrest, he continued. So, naturally, your body cam footage will support that, correct? The footage should show irrefutable evidence of my client's resistance. A tense pause, Mathers' lips twitched. Just slightly, that Langston's voice didn't waver. Play the footage. The screen switched. The body cam footage began to roll. The jury leaned forward. The judge watched carefully. The video showed Elijah standing still, hands raised, speaking calmly. There was no aggression and no resistance and no sudden movements. Langston let the silence stretch, then asked a question that would change everything. "Officer Mathers," he said, stepping closer, "can you explain why there is a missing segment in your body cam footage?" Silence. The tension in the room thickened. Langston took another step forward. "Can you offer a satisfactory explanation for the gap in recording?" Mathers didn't answer. His shoulders tensed, his confidence cracking like glass under pressure. Langston turned toward the judge. No further questions. The judge's fingers tapped rhythmically against his bench. Then he spoke. "Charges dismissed." The words cut through the courtroom like a blade, a collective gasp, then whispers, murmurs. Elijah exhaled. His wrists were freed from the cuffs. Mathers sat frozen, his career crumbling before his eyes. The missing body cam footage, the fabricated resistance charge, it was all falling apart, but wasn't over. Not for Mathers. The moment Elijah walked out courthouse, reporters swarmed him. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. But Elijah wasn't interested in the cameras. He wasn't interested in vengeance. He was interested in change. That afternoon, a lawsuit was filed, unlawful arrest, falsified police report, tampering with evidence. Mathers was put under investigation. His body cam footage was pulled apart frame by frame, and missing footage recovered that showed Mathers manually turning off his body cam before arresting Elijah. The city watched as the truth unraveled. Mathers was fired, his reputation destroyed. He wasn't just a cop who made a bad call. He was part of a system that had been exposed. But for Elijah, this was never just about him. IT was about the others. For every one of them who fought back, there were hundreds who didn't have the chance, who got lost in the system, who never got justice. And Elijah wasn't going to let that happen. Elijah's future had always been in aerospace. But now, he had a bigger mission. He took his experience and turned it into a movement. He worked with legal organizations to help fight wrongful convictions. He spoke at colleges about systemic injustice. He worked with programmers to create an AI system that analyzed body cam footage for missing segments, gaps, and tampering. He wasn't just another black teenager who'd been arrested. He was a force. And his name, the sister would never forget it, because he had changed the game forever.